Hi guys, welcome to another video. This time I will show you a small Eurorack system that I built to write another album. A while back you already asked me to show you my whole full system, as you can see it here, and to go through all the modules that I have in there. And I kind of thought that maybe that would be a bit overkill. I suspect that a video like that would become very long. And even this video might get a tad too long. I don't know yet how long it's gonna take me to go through all the modules in this little system. You can actually see it here. It is this bottom row, basically. It can be separated from the rest or used together with the bigger case. I wanted to be able to detach this part of the system and use it with my semi-modular synthesizers or with my Volca, or to just use it as an effect. And for this I didn't want it to be stuck in the big rack, basically. The cool thing about my 3D printed Eurorack case is that the model from which I print the files is actually modular too. This way you can have a case that is exactly the size you need. You don't have blank panels and space that could tempt you to extend the system, like it usually happens when there's a blank space in the system. You just think, what could I put there? Maybe I should buy another module, and yeah, you know how gas can be. I planned the system specifically with these modules in mind, and then I printed it exactly to size so that I wouldn't be tempted to buy more stuff. The idea behind the system is that I wanted to use it as an effect for many other things. I also only wanted to have one element in there. I wanted to write an album that is sort of hybrid, that uses the modular as inspiration and then builds around it in Ableton. So it was supposed to be something that can work with other synthesizers, with the Crave, with the Edge, or my Volca, or anything else that I want to plug in there. I can even plug a guitar in there and it will work too, so that's really cool. It is very versatile in that sense. But I also wanted it to be able to have a voice in itself, and it actually can do several different things in there because I kept it flexible on purpose. The interesting thing about this little system is that it doesn't actually have an oscillator as such. It has the Disting Mark IV, which can serve as an oscillator or a sample player or a noise source. So it can be a voice, but it doesn't have to be. It can be used as an effect or as a voice. That was the main purpose for this one. But let's just go through the modules and I can show you what I have in there. It is powered by the Befaco Pow Skiff. What I really like about this module is that you can plug other stuff into it quite easily and get power from it for that. For example, I can plug in my Launchpad Pro and it gets power from that, or I can plug in my Microfreak and use that. There's also 9-volt power, which helps if you want to use guitar pedals, and I sometimes do that, so that's really nice. Since this is meant to be used with other synthesizers, I have a Mutable Ears in there to bring in external signals and boost them. So I can plug a guitar in there or a synthesizer or whatever, and this will boost the signal. There's also an envelope follower in there, and that makes it more interesting than the simpler versions that you can build for yourself. The music thing, Microphony, is what this is based upon originally, and you can build that yourself, and I thought of building this myself, but I really wanted an envelope follower too. And Mutable Ears itself is relatively hard to build because it has very tiny parts, so this is a board module. I also have a Monsoon in there, which is a Clouds clone. What's cool about the Monsoon in comparison to Clouds is that it has these sliders. The sliders I really like. And it also has separate inputs for all the blend functions, so you have separate ins for feedback, stereo spread, and I use that a lot, and it's a really nice thing to have. I have parasites on there, so it has 2 additional modes in comparison to Clouds. There's also a resonator in there and a reverb effect, and that extends it even more, and it's already a quite deep effect anyway, so that's really cool. Then there is the Bastl Basil, which Bastl kindly sent to me, and that is my main delay effect. I love this one because it has half speed and that sort of thing. You can do all sorts of time-based effects with it. Chorus, for example, reverb, delay, and you can also make drones with it because it has a filter in the feedback section, and that means it never gets out of hand, and that's really nice. My main modulation source is the instruo øchd. This gives me 8 LFO outputs. These are all free running, unsynchronized, and they run at different speeds. And I spread those around the system for modulation, and they're really nice. There's one CV input on there. You can self-modulate by plugging one of the LFOs into itself, or plug something external into there. There's also one knob that controls the rate of all of the outputs, and it's very simple to use because it has just this one knob. Often I don't even attenuate these because they run at 5V maximum. That makes it pretty cool to interface it with semi-modulars that max out at 5V. It's not the most flexible LFO out there, but there are many outputs, and you can even do crazy things like run it as a voice in itself. So I've actually used øchd as a voice in a patch too, so that's one of the oscillators in this basically. It only makes bass sounds, but it's cool for that. The next module in there is the Expert Sleepers ES8, which is an audio interface. I normally use it with the ADAT ins and outs with my big audio interface, my Scarlett 18i20, but you can also run it from USB, and with that I can record it into the laptop too. That's super flexible. I have it here in the middle of the case because it's the only space where it fits. It is a rather deep module, and I have these modules at the top of the case, the power module and the output module, and they get in the way with very deep modules, and the ES8 is quite deep. With this I can extend the system into VCV-Rack, for example. I can record, I can send signals into here from the computer too and use it as an effect. So the ES8 makes it really flexible. It helps with things like using the øchd as a voice, for example, because you can use the silent wave voice controller, and then it can calibrate the oscillator for you, and you can run it from the DAW, very precisely tuned, and that's very nice. Yeah, it's a very cool, flexible thing to have in a small system like that. The only downside of it is that it gets a bit hot, so the case gets quite toasty in summer, but I haven't had any problems, so at the moment it seems to be running fine like this, even though it gets quite warm. The next module I have in there is the Disting Mark IV, and the Disting is a multi-function module that can do pretty much anything. It can be anything. It can be a voice, it can be utility, it can be effects. There are delays in there, reverbs, and all sorts of utility functions. I've used it as a voice a lot. There are pretty decent sounding oscillators in there, and you can also do sample playback, for which I've used it quite a bit too, and it's a really cool module in that way. A lot of people don't like it because it is very manual heavy, and I wouldn't know how to use it without a manual. I only know that B8 is one of the oscillators, and that's about it. I don't really remember anything else. For the rest, I tend to just look up things in the manual and check out things. How I like to use it most often is to just pick something randomly from the function set and see what I can do with it. So why not use it as a precision adder today, or that's the way I use it normally. I also have my 5V limiter module in there, and this is a module that I designed myself from a schematic that I found on Music from Outer Space, and this was so that I don't fry any of my semi-modular synthesizers. My Crave and my Edge both say that they only want 5V signals and not more. They can take about 6 because their own outputs are about 6, but that's how I calibrated it in the end, and I just have that in there so that I can make sure whatever I plug into my Crave or my Edge won't fry anything. So this is basically my fail-safe module. Most often I just use it as a simple attenuator, and It works really well for that, but it also has diodes in there to prevent signals from getting too hot. There's also a Mutable Peaks clone in there. It is called Jack Peak, and it is a smaller version of Peaks. This is a multifunction module too. It's not quite as extreme as the Disting, but it can do several different things. It can produce LFOs and envelopes and tap tempo LFOs and drums. There's some Easter egg functions hidden in there too. I use it mainly for envelopes and LFOs, and if I want to sync something from my AE modular, it usually runs in there. This one can be a little bit confusing sometimes, because I never remember which knob does what, and then I fiddle about, and especially when I'm in the LFO section, I do get confused because you select the waveform of the LFO with one of the knobs, and then I don't necessarily always know what's going on, but I do know that all the way to the right, if I find the right knob, it will be a random walk, and that's mostly the function that I use it for. I like it for randomness and smooth randomness, but it can also be a bit more stepped, and plugging that into the øchd is one of my staples. I really like that to randomize the outputs of that. One thing that I noticed right away when I got this module was that it doesn't quite work with all VCAs. There are different output levels for envelopes, and this one isn't very hot, so it won't be able to open up all VCAs. Specifically, I had a problem with the Befaco ABC that wouldn't open up fully, but it works fine with mutable VCAs, and it also works well with the next module, which is the AI Synthesis LPG. This is a low-pass gate, and a low-pass gate is something in between a VCA and a filter. It can be both at the same time, and this is an idea out of a West Coast style synthesis. I got really interested in that type of thing and wanted to play around with it. That's why I put that one in there. It's also quite flexible because it can be both a VCA and a filter, so depending whether I need just a filter, I can use it in that mode. It's also quite useful in performance because the different options of VCA, VCF and LPG sound slightly different, so you can create variations by switching through the options while you're performing, and I really like it for that alone. It sounds really nice. It can also close properly, which not all LPGs can. It has a step function that is really cool for that. I think it's a really cool, flexible little module that gives you lots of options, sound options and usage options. Whether you need a VCA, a filter or an LPG, it always sounds nice. I also have the neutral Labs Meg in there, which is a wave folder, and this can add wave shaping options to oscillators that don't have that sort of capability. I'm thinking specifically of the Crave there, because in the saw wave option it can't really do pulse width or anything like that, so this really helps with that. I've also used wave folders and wave shapers like this as a distortion, and that's really cool too. I also have a sub 101A in there, and this is a sub oscillator. The guy who designed it, I think, designed it specifically with the Crave in mind, and this just adds a sub oscillator in an SH101 style, and it sounds really good, and I like it to use with the Crave to fatten up the sound quite a bit, and you can make really dark sounds with that. It's really lovely. So I put this in there specifically because I wanted to use this case with the Crave a lot. The last module in this case is the Befaco Out version 3. This is an output module, and it has an headphone out, which is very useful, especially since it has a separate volume control for that. I built this specifically because my Crave kept destroying my ears, because there the volume control for the headphones and the normal VCA out is the same, and you can't really change that. So whenever I was recording, I sometimes blasted my ears with the headphone output. I wanted to prevent that, so I built this output module for the headphone out. I don't necessarily need it always for recording things, but it helps when I don't have it near a computer and I can just listen to everything on there. Most of the time I just patch it into the output first and listen to it through headphones, and then when I'm done with a patch I plug it into the ES8 and then record it from there. It also helps when I already have the Ears 8 full with other signals and I can't really record more voices with it, then I can use that one to get signals out too. You don't really need an output module, you can also just use an attenuator. I do that quite a bit too, but for me it was mainly something that I built because of the headphone output. Now, quite a few of these modules were actually DIY. I built the Befaco Pow Skiff and the output. I also built the Monsoon, the AI Synthesis LPG, the neutral Labs Meg, and the Sub 101A. And I also designed the 5V limiter module myself. So there are quite a few DIY modules in there, but it also contains most of my bought modules because I wanted to explore them in more detail. When you build a module yourself, then you know it in much more detail than something that you just bought in a shop. And I wanted to explore them more, and that's why I put them into the system to write this album, to force myself to focus on them a bit more. This way I don't use different modules in every single patch. I'm forced to use the ones that I have available here, and this way I explore them a bit more. The main idea behind the system was for it to be flexible so that it can be used as an effect, but that it can also be used as a standalone voice by using, for example, the resonator mode in the Monsoon, or by using the Disting as a voice. Yeah, it's a cool little system. By now I've already written a few tracks with it. The music that you've been hearing in this video was all written on this system, so it is quite flexible and I'm quite happy with what I put together there. It's quite interesting to explore, and I think the album will be quite interesting too. I think it's an interesting study approach to make these small systems like this. It helps me to focus. I think putting this together was a success. This also helps with option paralysis. If you have a big system, then there are many different modules you can choose from. In a smaller system, you have to focus and you have to be a bit more inventive to pull things off too. It's quite a challenge sometimes to have just a few modules like this, but I found it quite flexible for what I want to do, and it's quite interesting as a system to explore. So now I'm quite curious to see how the album will turn out, and I'm at the moment still a bit up in the air and don't really know what I have yet. I've written a few tracks, but I'm not really quite sure yet how it will all fit together and whether it might end up in more than one album or not. Let me know what you think about this system. I'm curious to hear your opinions about small systems like this. Would you prefer a big system and not use a small system like this? Let me know also whether you want to see the rest of my modules in the big system. I can do that perhaps. It would probably be a very long video, but I can try if you really want me to do that. If you enjoyed the music in this video, then you can check out the bandcamp link in the description, where you can find my latest album, Hypnagogia, and also my first album, Endless Nights. If you enjoyed the music here, then it's likely that you're gonna enjoy those two albums as well. So do check it out if you're interested. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It really helps out my channel, so I would really appreciate it. You can also support my channel through super thanks or by becoming a Ko-fi supporter. There are different membership tiers on Ko-fi where you can get early access to my videos, or you can download the music, and there will be also more stuff coming in the future. Thanks a lot for your support, it really helps. In any case, I hope I see you soon for another video. Bye!